Hey gamers! I'm that guy in Skyrim that for some reason collects lots of cheese wheels. Jason.
And I need you to go kill 10 orcs so I can give you this sack of potatoes needed to craft your ultimate weapon. It's me, Patrick. Welcome to RPGaymer Episode 8, a podcast about linear and open-ended video games. Yeehaw!
Well, I don't have a sack of potatoes with me, but I'll work on that.
Oh, I want some French fries, real bad.
I know, right? I know, real bad. So like Patrick said, this episode is about linearity and open-ended type of games. When classifying RPGs, there's often categories you might consider: Western versus Japanese style, action or turn-based, so on and so forth. One of the larger defining characteristics that span multiple types of RPGs, though, is that aspect of open world versus linear. That's what we wanted to kind of bring up and discuss today. So with that in mind, I will ask you, Patrick, the Lord of Potatoes, what makes a game open world and what makes a game linear in the broad sense?
If you only knew. So obviously we're not ever going to be able to do like a true scholarly in-depth definition of something, but I mean, like, we can just kind of go with the things that we notice from our experiences in gaming. So definitely linear games, they tend to just be overly structured, and they have narratives that have like branching points. Usually, like, it's not like a linear game necessarily means that you are set on one and only trajectory as you're going through. Like, it
Right.
could have branching paths, but it still kind of locks you into a certain notion. When a plot point progresses, sometimes you can be locked out, maybe not, maybe you can go back to earlier areas, but you just the continuous page turning of a story, instead of being able to like just put it down and go by the wayside and do what you want. Open world games, like, they don't restrict you at all. There isn't a sequence that you have to go through. You can kind of like do it on your own. And I think if I had to think of the game that pops in my mind immediately, it's always Breath of the Wild, just because as soon as you get off of the plateau at the very beginning of the game, you literally can just go about wherever you want. And they give you general direction if you're really not sure, but you can just say peace out and I want to go this way instead. But what do you think? What makes a game open, or what makes a game linear?
Yeah, for sure. Everything you said, I pretty much agree with too. I think your earlier games you tend to see more as the traditional linear games. So I'm talking like NES, SNES era, especially if we're looking at RPGs. And it's a lot less player choice in their own action. So you're kind of given this thing like, we got to stop this materia thing from happening, and then you go like do that thing. There's no real time to be like, what, I'm going to dick around and I'm going to like go over here instead. You kind of can, but usually the story is presented to you, and like that's the path you go down, with like kind of a side branching like left turn that eventually comes back to the main path. So it's always kind of the same. You're working towards always the same goal. With open world or non-linear games, you might still have one specific goal. We got to stop chaos or something like that. But like how you get there is more determined by you as the player. You have more like voice to do what you want to do. Bigger games like this would, Breath of the Wild for sure. You're going to stop Ganon or his resurrection, but are you going to go straight there from the plateau? Are you going to instead go to Kakariko Village? Are you even going to do the 4 divine beasts? Like, it doesn't matter what you do. In the end, you have your goal and you choose how to get there. And so that's what you see more in, I would say, more modern style games nowadays. And that's where I think the big characteristic definition comes from.
If you went back to Baby J, level 1 Jason, rookie form Digivolution, what were some of your earlier memories in open world games? Like, what were some of your first dabbles? I know for everyone it's at a different point, and I'm certain that mine is much, much earlier than yours, but Where did
Mhm.
you first dabble?
If I'm no longer War Metal Jason and I'm just regular Jason, then I
You're
guess
far from War Metal Jason.
First open world game, it was probably Oblivion. That's one of the biggest ones I can think of, unless you want to count a game like EverQuest. It's kind of open world, but it's more MMO, which I guess is its own thing. But I would say when I really got into open world, do whatever you want. Yeah, it was Oblivion, which is Elder Scrolls 4. That's before Skyrim. And side story, I remember getting a personal computer, like a desktop, right after high school to go into college, and justified it to my parents, like, oh yeah, I'll need this, blah blah blah. You need it for school. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm a game
fucking
on Oblivion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a game on this.
And so like I had it set up in my room in my house before college started, and like loaded up Skyrim, loaded up Oblivion and started playing through it. Yeah, that was my first one, and it was a big breath of fresh air, I think. Just being able to kind of get all these quests and be like, here you go, man, what are you going to do next? And there's no real direction for you. It was cool. I do think it can be a little overwhelming because if you don't know what to do, or if you're like, I don't know where to go, you could be someone that might just think I'm not going to enjoy this, or I'm going to be done. And I totally get it, because it's a completely different type of
Scott's
beast.
that way, where he thinks that he doesn't like open world games, but then he'll play open world games like Spider-Man or Horizon Zero Dawn Forbidden West, and like those are some of his favorites.
Yeah.
But I think there's some of them have more clear quest points than others. So I think, like that whole intimidating beast is a little less intimidating when you have a clearer checklist of what to do.
Yeah.
But an Elder Scrolls is fortunately one of those where you do tend to get like, this is where you need to go.
Yeah, totally. And like to get to your point with Scott and like the checklist, it is really nice to have that, so like at least I can go here to do stuff. And just in Oblivion, walking to some place and seeing like you've discovered blah 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 cave or whatever, or if you've played Skyrim, it's the exact same thing. It's really cool, and it's neat. Like, it makes you want to play and explore more of the game. And if I knew like, hey, over here is the next quest, or it's, I don't know, it's in this direction, instead of like fast traveling like you might do in I don't know, it's like a Fallout or something like that, it might be cool to be like, I'm just gonna brave it and I'm gonna walk and see what I'm gonna find. And that's like,
sometimes that's
half
nice.
the enjoyment.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice and sometimes it's not. Like, I know when I played Oblivion, I struggled with some of the quests, in the sense of like, I know they give you clues about some things, but you can clearly miss something. And that was that completionist that I really like fought to get away from, to just like relax and enjoy it and don't worry if you're missing things. I think growing up as a player's guide kid really ingrained that in my brain, to just like make sure that you hit as much as you can. But
you gotta get all the enjoyment out of that game.
Yeah, but
well, what was your first foray into open world?
It was also an Elder Scrolls game, but it was actually Daggerfall. So even before Morrowind,
it was before, yeah, exactly.
So I actually had to look up when this was. When I was,
it's like 1992. I don't know.
It's
early.
96. It's
damn,
96.
I'm way off. Yeah.
So I probably played it, if I had to guess, in 97, maybe 98. I would say probably 97 though.
All the cool kids are playing Ocarina of Time and Patrick's playing Daggerfall.
I was still playing Ocarina. But I thought it was really cool in the sense that, like, you think of what Skyrim is now, or Oblivion, and it is still very much so intact. And I had played games that were kind of similar to the first person structure, like Ultima Underworld, I think was probably one of the first PC games that I'd ever played. That's not an open world game, but it like well, I guess maybe a little bit, just very confined. But Daggerfall, like, you'd make your character and you'd give them some stats and some skills and some weaknesses and some strengths and whatnot, and then you just go about it. It was just a very simplistic version of what
was to come.
Yeah, what was to come, but it was still fun. I think the amount of customization was a lot more open, and it was a lot more stat heavy than something like Skyrim is. I think Skyrim is like in some ways a more boiled down version to appeal to the masses. But
Yeah.
Daggerfall, like, really, it would just really had that cool, I just want to go on an adventure and I don't really want to have to worry about shit. And if I want to check into a main quest, I can. And then when I want to peace out from that main quest, I can do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's really unique about open world games, and probably why you see them more nowadays. I don't know, maybe a hot take, but I feel like it's maybe a bit easier for a developer to make a game like that, where there's these mini sized quests or interactions a player can do that they can really get enjoyment out of, as opposed to having to define like the linear game's mega narrative, like the narrative of Final Fantasy VII and how you're going to follow that path. Yeah, there's little branching stories, but you're always going down a well-written path towards the goal. Whereas in Daggerfall, I'm assuming it's similar to Oblivion, Skyrim, and whatnot. There's a lot of ways to get where you want to go if you want to go there, and then what you're going to do at the end is also very different. And I think it's just like, how do you as the player enjoy spending your time, and where do you find enjoyment?
So would you say that these games have changed some since then, or do you think at the core they're still very similar?
You mean like open world and linear games?
I would say just more open world games. I think linear games really haven't changed too much. I think that's just
no irony there.
Right, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think that they're still super solid games. But yeah, do you think that open world games have like evolved?
I think so. I think you hit one thing that I wanted to discuss too, and that's the complexity issue of open world games then, early 90s, mid 90s to now. I think that video games in general have reached a larger audience. So in mass, there's more people playing. And with that, I think there's more chance for confusion or drop off. So to see a game that was like, I have not played Daggerfall, but I've heard it's a little complicated comparatively, and even Morrowind to an extent. But
I would say that Morrowind's probably more complicated than Daggerfall, but yeah.
Sure. Well, even still, more cadence to the point then. Like when you're someone jumping in and there's so much to do, it might be like, dude, what do I do? Like, where do I put these skill points in? And you might jump out. But in a game like, let's just fast forward to Skyrim, and like you said, when you're walking, suddenly you're like, stamina is increased. Like things happen, and you're like, oh, cool, I just do stuff and it works. And I think that that's kind of where the evolution maybe went to. It appealed to a more general audience, and it became more approachable. Whereas the RPG, especially the PC RPG, like in the 80s and the early 90s, was very, very specific and heavy. And moving away from that is probably the right choice. And I think moving into a player-focused, do what you want when you want sort of feel of open world makes a lot of sense.
See, I thought it was a little bit more along the lines of how much you can do evolved. But the quality of what you can do, obviously, just because of, programming limitations and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And then most importantly, I think the impact of what you do and how, like, the impact on the world.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think that's probably one of the most unique things about an open world game versus a linear game, is that you feel like your choices and decisions have
impact in the world.
And they can change the world. I don't say it happens in every open world game, but in a lot of them, like, you see what happens, and it can affect things. If you do a quest line and it is killing like these 20 people, those 20 people are probably dead, or if you help a faction take over a certain area, that faction is now the domineering force. I also think a quality that's really unique to open world games is you get a lot more lore building.
Yeah, I could see that. You can get so many more nuanced stories.
Yeah, well, it's a lot more like the lore of the world and why the world is the way it is and why it works, versus in linear. I think linear is better at storytelling. Where open world games are more about story living, if that kind of makes sense. Like,
I get you.
Yeah, linear games are just like sitting there spelling it out to you, which is great because sometimes you just kind of want to sit and not have to worry about reading all those 20 lore books, or even in Spider-Man, like reading all of the collectibles. Or like whatever game it may be, just to get a good grasp of why things are the way that they are. They both, it's different in different ways. But do you think there are any qualities that stand out to you for either of open world or linear games that are kind of unique?
Yeah, you brought it up really well. I think that sometimes I do just want to sit down with a controller in my hand and just watch numbers go up. And you can usually do that in like a traditional game. So, for example, I was streaming a couple weeks ago now, Cat Quest 2. Very traditional.
Was that when I was vomiting to death?
Yeah, it was when you were vomiting.
I literally signed on to your stream to watch you play, and I was on there for 2 minutes long enough to type the vomit emojis, and then I'm like, oh, I don't have the energy to do this.
And then I saw that the player went away. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
In that game, like, it's tongue-in-cheek, pretty funny RPG, but it's traditional, and you're just going through the motions of the RPG. So it's not like a focus on a lot of the action or the combat, even though that's like what you're doing. You're kind of just getting the story. So I think that what's unique for a traditional game, and it's not exclusive to the traditional game, but that timeline or that movement can really tell a unique story because you're on a predetermined path. Like you as the developer know the player is going to be here at this time and they have just witnessed this. So in a good game, you can really capture that moment and those feelings and push the player towards the next emotion you want them to go to. A great example I'm thinking of for this is probably in Final Fantasy VI, when like the world changes, and so like it's a different feel. And there's other examples too, but if you got there from a different path, like I don't know, in like a Breath of the Wild, for example, if you didn't go a certain way, you've lost that experience, and if the core or the crutch of the experience is based on that journey and you don't go there, you kind of lose it. And I think that's where the traditional RPG can really stand out.
Yeah, it's the building, like it is
right.
the build up to some of those
like big moments. Yeah.
I also think that boss battles tend to be better in linear games over open world games.
Great call out. Yeah, I
there
agree.
are a couple games that are exceptions. Like obviously, Elden Ring has some incredible boss battles, but I just think like overall, I'm thinking of the spectrum of open world games. You don't tend to see too many that are great.
And I think like on that, I think you're right. And another aspect for the open world is you can just get like hella powerful and do like random shit and then over level yourself. So when you go to fight like some dragon, you just obliterate them. And like that is cool, but it takes away from the impact of that dragon.
It really does, and I think that's kind of why you see. Oh, well, I have problems with leveling up, which is probably going to be an episode in one season. But I also have issues with games like Fallout. When they stay away from something like that, or like you said in Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, you can come back with better gear. Just the progression system. Sometimes it's like it doesn't really matter. Like they either super ridiculous scale it to you, so there's just no point in grinding at all, or doing extra things, or like you said, it's just full on. I just massacred this boss.
Yeah, like which is fun. Don't get me wrong. I like to do that.
I don't know. I personally don't, because like you said, it's one of those things where
it's immersion breaking.
It's not like you can't grind in a linear game, because you obviously can, but I think the epicness of the boss battles, there tends to be a lot more meaning behind them when you have them too. And sometimes, depending on the type of game, the mechanics that you see in order to engage in the boss tends to be better. Like in God of War, there's a lot more intuitiveness to fighting the head Valkyrie than there is to fighting the dragon in Skyrim, where hit potion, hit potion, hit potion. Like there's not really much else that you have to do to that.
Yeah, I mean, God of War is a good example because it's well crafted, and I freaking love that game. And the way it makes you as the player do the mechanics it wants to show you, like you couldn't do that in an open world game because I could just choose not to. But with the Valkyrie fights, even the ones that are like required, like you have to do the stuff that the game offers. You can't just spam other things. And I think that's a wonderful cadence for why, or a wonderful example, I should say, for why you're always going to have linear and open world types of games, because they're just, at this point, they're just two different subgenres.
So one other thing I have an issue with when it comes to open world games is that there tends to be a lot of padding.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're playing something like a linear game, it tends to be more streamlined. Not that linear games don't have padding, because of course they do, but
Yeah.
I think if you kind of like wait it out, you'd have a lot more padding in the open world experience. Do you think that padding outshines a standard streamlined game?
Paddington Bear. Yeah. Does it outshine a streamlined game? It really depends, but I would say probably no. Like in the general, I don't think you're ever going to get subplots and sub stories that are so grand they're going to outpace the any big stalwarts really. But okay, any good traditional RPG probably not. And I'm just thinking it's because they're so like their impact is so much lower. So, for example, I can talk about the fun I had in Oblivion joining. I'm gonna forget the name. Is it the Thieves Guild? I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And like how you get to steal the shit from that tower at the very end of that quest line. Spoilers. It's pretty cool. It's really fun, and I felt like wow, like this was a cool story. I like the progression that it went through, but like it's just one kind of small thing, and that moment was cool. But like, it's not going to be as cool as finally like defeating Kuja, and getting to that moment of like, oh yes, like I finally did this. I can say I've done this thing. So I think the padding that's around the main quest in a game that's open world is never as good as kind of the generalness you get from the linear game. But I think it's necessary to be there because it's kind of what makes the game the game. Like I think.
Oh yeah, can you imagine
padding.
playing an open world game that just has nothing to do? Because you obviously like having things to do, and it's not like all quests can be equal. Like
Right.
there has to be like it's like a certain gravity. Like maybe your one quest is playing hide and seek with kids, and the other one is to kill the ogre that's been terrorizing their village. And maybe
Yeah.
there's some depth to that and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think of Skyrim or Fallout 4, where you have some quests that are just so boring and
Mm-hmm.
bland. Like it's the heaviest, worst possible kind of fetch quest, because it'll say like, "Well, go to this place and get this thing," or "Go to this place and clear out these ghouls." And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's funny. I just went to that place and I cleared out those ghouls, but now those ghouls are back because I talked to you and you told me to go there and clear out those ghouls. It kind of breaks some of that immersion, and it really adds that, oh, they're really just trying to drag this game out.
Yeah, and then like I gotta bring up No Man's Sky when it first started, because that game had nothing like really. It looked cool and the idea was great, but that is an open world game with really nothing to do. Like
yeah, it was just go here, harvest this, go here.
Yeah, it's all the
this.
same stuff, and like you see as the player the potential for where it could go, but you're like, you know what? They missed the mark by a lot. And this is what 2016 when it first came out, so I'm sure it's better now. But yeah, that's an example.
That game
of where
is one of those like Final Fantasy 14 Reborn,
Realm Reborn,
miracles where they just went back and really gave it the time. But the first launch was really pathetic. I think Fallout 76 was kind of the same way when it came out, where I know when I was playing that, I personally liked it, but I knew it wasn't everyone's cup of tea to just kind of like aimlessly wander this like super rural area and just kind of survive and wonder what happened to the families as you go, because everything was very fluff in like the OG, and they've added a lot more to make things a lot more meaningful, but launch was not great.
So you brought up earlier God of War, and then I'm bringing up No Man's Sky, and those are typically not really RPGs. You tend to probably see open world and linear talked about with a lot of RPGs, but are there other genres that lend themselves better to being one over the other?
I don't necessarily think so. I think we just see a lot more, but I think you don't actually see a lot of true RPGs that are open world. You see more games with RPG elements.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think maybe like subsets of genres, like we do see a lot of action games, but they tend to be a superhero game, or something where people are already really familiar with a character like The Witcher, and they're like, okay, well, we really want to expand this universe. But
Yeah.
I don't think we see a lot of like true turn-based open world RPGs, but I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I love the superhero games that come out. Like Batman is great.
Yeah, those are fun ones.
Spider-Man's kind of
Spider-Man.
had a great time with that game. So, but I don't know. I don't know if there is like this is better set for being open world, and I think that's one of the reasons why RPGs, like true RPGs, tend to be a little bit more linear. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think the only genre I can think of that really does can do and does better being open world versus linear is the shooter. So if you want to have like any shooting game that wants to tell a story, I like it's okay to do it in a traditional sense, like your Call of Duties are big ones too. But I feel like when it's more open and the player has choice because you're literally carrying like guns and cannons and you're very impactful, the open worldness seems to be better. The biggest example here, and I'm not sure if you've played it yet, is probably Destiny. And I feel like it makes sense because you're in this war in multiple worlds. And so it kind of makes sense that you are just a guardian that goes there, and there happens to be a zone that needs your help. So it makes sense that you would go there. There happens to be this area that has a big boss in it, so you're going to go like defeat it with a small squatted team in an instance. So it lends itself better to the open world aspect to it. But if you're doing like the traditional storytelling in, let's just do Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, pretty good and pretty iconic for what it is. It's showing you the path it's going down, and it does those things that RPGs do well. It knows where the player's coming from, and it can tell exciting moments. But like once it's done, it's kind of done. Like you can't really like relive it in the next sequel because it's already happened. But with the open world shooter, Borderlands is another good one. You can have a lot of fun with how you go about doing what you want to do.
But do you think that Borderlands is an open world game? Because I wouldn't say so. I would say it's just kind of like a shooter with RPG elements that it's still linear.
Yeah,
You can explore some, but I don't really think there's like a clear
a
break
true open
in.
world. I
Right.
agree. I don't think it is, and I feel like we're kind of like elephant in the room with that one too, because there's so many examples where it will be kind of this, but not fully. And I think that's kind of the beauty of where we are now with games. Like people are blending the best aspects of both. So yeah, I wouldn't say Borderlands 3 in particular. I think it's the most open worldy of those games. It's definitely not a full open world game, but you do have a little more player choice and freedom with what you want to do. But yeah, in terms of like Destiny level, no, it's not like that.
I'm happy that you brought that up too, because I think there's a lot of confusion that comes into what is an open world game. And I remember getting into an argument with someone, and not really an argument, but just like a discussion about if Hollow Knight was open world. And I'm like, no,
I don't think so.
Hollow Knight's a Metroidvania, and like, well, aren't
Absolutely.
Metroidvanias open world? And I was like, no,
No.
because
There's a
Metroidvanias, like
literal map number that says like how much complete it is.
right, and like they masquerade as an open world game. You
Right.
can theoretically explore in a disjointed manner, but you don't impact the world around you all that much when you're doing
Yeah.
these games. It's just kind of like well, yeah, you could go route ABC or BAC, but like that doesn't necessarily make it open world,
Yeah,
you
you're always
know?
going towards D, like at the
Right.
end.
And even if there are a couple of different endings, again, I don't think an ending constitutes impacting the world at the same time. When you're playing something like Fallout, whichever one you're playing, you see the changes actively happen. It's not like,
Hmm.
in Star Ocean with its 106 endings, you just happen to pick these few different options and all of a sudden, boom, you got ending
Got an
83.
ending. Yeah.
Right. So it's different. I can see how there could be confusion there, and there may be Metroidvanias that do slant a little bit more toward open world, but I think Metroidvanias are Metroidvanias for a reason, and open world games are open world. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, but there's not necessarily a complete one to one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that with Metroidvanias, and I hadn't heard anybody say that about Hollow Knight. That's kind of funny though. Yeah, I don't think I would ever consider it that way, just because you, again, even as the developer, like, you know where the player's going to go. Just are they going to get there in 1 hour or 3 hours, and what else are they going to explore? So it's still kind of confined. Whereas I feel like with the open world, there might be something where this is completely not even seen, and it can be straight up integral to the plot of a character that is in the main story. Fallout does that, for example, with some like side characters. And
I
you
feel
could
like
just
there's some
completely
kind
miss
of
it.
character progression
Hmm?
in open world games too. Like,
Yeah,
I'd say maybe like 60% of the time you make the character. It's not very often in an open world game. And there are some, like Spider-Man, Batman, Geralt, you are a person who is in this open world environment, but you're still watching this development. And in Metroidvanias, you don't really see much of a development. The core is really just more about the exploration in itself and unlocking new parts of a map, which I just don't really think means it's
yeah,
open world.
yeah. I think they're both great games. Like Metroidvanias and open worlds are both one of my favorites, but I think that I'm usually in the mood for one over the other, and I don't think I would confuse one and be like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do now, and be like, oh shit, I got it wrong.
Right.
They're just a little too different. Are there possibly times when we're thinking about open world or linear types of games that going to one or the other is the wrong move? Like maybe a game shouldn't have been open world, or maybe a game should have been linear?
Uh, my default answer is Final Fantasy 13, and it's just that it shouldn't have been either.
Yeah. Okay. It should go 12 to 14.
Yeah, because you're thinking about Final Fantasy 13, and it's like, well, the beginning was like the
Straight
definition
paths.
of linear, so it shouldn't have been that. But then you get to later on when people claim that it becomes open world, which it's not. It's just has an expansive
A
area.
bigger map.
Yeah, area. So I think that was an example of a game that maybe it could have benefited from being a full open world, or maybe it could have benefited from being a true linear experience, but just not what it was because it's a garbage game. Sorry, Danny, if you listen to this.
He's signing off.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't tend to think of games like, wow, this shouldn't have been open world,
Mhm.
but I always look at some games and I'm like, this could have been so much better if it was linear. Like, I want to see Dragon Quest go open world at some point, and Dragon Quest 11 is incredible, but like it would be cool to see what a turn-based RPG would look like. There are a lot of games that could have that what if, but I don't necessarily think it's wrong. I feel like
Yeah.
games are just kind of what they are, and they don't flop because of that one specific thing, unless you're Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, I think for this one too, it's funny you said Dragon Quest, because I also thought of that one too, and I think it might be because Dragon Quest 10 is kind of open worldy, and so is 9.
Well, because it's
kind of
10's
there.
well, no, 9's definitely not open
Yeah.
world, and 10 is an MMO. So like, I don't even know how to classify an MMO because
Yeah, what is it?
yeah, like we again, another episode, another day. But I feel like that's also this other genre where sometimes they are open world because you can kind of go to different areas, but is that just because it's an online game and they need to make it large enough to appeal to the audiences? But yeah, I digress. But I would definitely wouldn't say Dragon Quest 9 is, because you have to complete the story in order,
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like you can go other places, and I feel like they were getting to the idea of being less straight from this town to this town, but like it's definitely not there. And then we didn't get 10, and then 11 is very large, so I see like maybe they're going there, and they already announced 12, so like maybe, but I don't know. I feel like the games that are rooted in the traditional, like I just want them to be really really freaking good at traditional like linear storytelling. Like I like, and like for example with 11, it'd be cool to see like a Sylvando spinoff, like where it's their story, and like maybe we can see more of that. So maybe that's kind of where I would be leaning. And I think it's because with open world games, I never really see wanting to take them linear unless I like a character. Because I think if you're going to go linear, you're probably telling someone's story, and like I don't know who else I'd really want to hear more of right now. Like maybe I just haven't played the game yet, and I don't know.
Right. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, where we talk about other characters. When I think of open world games, I don't, typically you're just riding solo and you don't have other people with you.
Mhm.
It's just really NPCs or, even in Skyrim or uh Fallout, you have your companions that kind of go with you, but you can't play as them. Do you think that a game being open world kind of affects how NPCs are utilized compared to linear games? And do you think one has an advantage over the other?
Yeah, I think it definitely affects it. And I think it comes back to the storytelling elements from linear games. I think that there's more of a chance to create unique like atmospheres and moments when characters are going to be together experiencing a specific storyline. We just talked about 11, Dragon Quest 11. I mean, there's examples there. And like even if you like swap out your party members at the same time, they still have like reactions based on you being there.
Well, I'm not just talking about party members. I'm trying to think of like the people
NPCs
in the world too. That just literally like live in it.
Yeah, for sure. I think like I feel like you would probably tend to see characters like NPCs that just kind of react to what's happening around them, and then they might go back to like doing their normal scripted stuff. I'm trying to think the name of that town that's in Dragon Quest 11, that like seaport town that gets invaded. It's eluding me, but
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like that happens.
Gondolia.
Yeah, Gandalia. That's right. So like they get invaded, like people get attacked, and then like afterwards, people kind of reference it, but like it's kind of normal again. Even though if I was like a townsfolk, I'd be like, "What the fuck just happened?" Like I'd be so worried. Yeah, and like you kind of get that in a linear game, but you get it like even less in like an open world one, where like unless the town is Megaton and it's gotten destroyed by a nuclear weapon, you don't usually see it at all. Like sometimes you could literally be fighting characters and like people just walk by and be like, "Hey, you want to buy this?" And like,
I mean, I guess I see what you're seeing somewhat with like the really poor instances of like scripting and whatnot, but I felt the exact opposite because you literally can go into a town in a lot of open world games like Fallout or the Elder Scrolls and just kill people, and they're gone. And you can't do that in a lot of linear games where, like literally if someone dies, unless they're super pertinent to the story, they're just removed from the world. And you kind of do see that impact somewhat. I know what you're meaning, like in the sense where if you kill a kid's mom, they're not going to be like, "Where's my mommy?" They're still going to follow their script. But at the same time, like, you've made a change. You've definitely clearly changed it. And with the instance of Megaton, like you said too, you completely wipe a town off the map. That town is no longer there, and people will talk about that in different towns about how that happened, even if it's just like little side conversations as your character is passing by. So I thought that
that is pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like they're less vital in that okay, but also I think the conversations that you have with random NPCs tend to be a little bit more important in linear games too.
Probably. Yeah. They could be straight up giving you hints about what to do, but it's also probably a little bit more subtle towards your zone or your area, and based on what you've previously done. So yeah, it could be a little more impactful from the very beginning. I agree with that too.
Humorous context, I feel like, tends to happen from a lot of NPCs. I'm trying to think of most PS1 RPGs where you just talk to random people and they have funny lines, like Lunar's Silver Star story. Like most of the humor in that game comes from just having random conversations with people, and even though it doesn't necessarily progress the game, it still can add a lot to the hilarity. So they're just used in different ways, and I think that is really kind of unique to both of the games where NPCs are just so different.
Yeah, and I feel like it's probably a natural carryover from linear to open world, because I think it's pretty obvious linear games came first. And I think if you're trying to be like, let's make this bigger, you're just carrying over those aspects from the linear game to an open world or bigger RPG. And it can be tough. I think some things don't just translate one to one. Like it needs to be catered and worked better to like actually effectively be, a good use of someone's time and storytelling.
Well, what influences have linear games had on open world games then?
Yeah, so storytelling and character narrative, I think, carry over from linear to open world. And I think that your other aspect is probably the sense of like fulfillment, I guess is what I would say. So I think that in a game, let's pick on Final Fantasy 9, like I'm moving my story along as Dane and crew, and like we're discovering stories and getting stronger as like a group. I think that might carry over to a game like let's pick on Oblivion again. You immediately meet the Emperor and you're trying to like help them and develop their story. So like the influence they have is it's immediate in that sense, but I feel like it kind of ends there, because if you kept going and just did more linear things in the open world game, it would either just become a linear game or it would just be not good. Like it wouldn't impact the way you want an open world game to impact the player. I think it would lose other aspects. So I think for me there's very little like in common between the two that they completely overlap and share. I think the better games, the God of War, for example, the new one, I think it takes what it enjoyed from the beginning games, but it makes it kind of just tangential to what they're telling in this new type of gameplay.
Yeah, it's hard to think about it in that way, kind of too, because those are games in the same series. Mm-hmm. So we actually saw this going from a linear experience to the older God of Wars to a more open. I don't know if I would say it's completely open, but it's something that is more open. So yeah, it's hard because if it's hard to compare, like, well, this Mario is a linear experience. How would we compare that to this open world game, and what would the influence be? So I think it's just maybe looking at something from a different perspective, and I think that's really what it is. Like that's the only thing it really changes. I don't think it really is the case of that one is better than the other. I just think that are there any series for you that you think that does open world really well, or maybe does linear really well?
Yeah, I think so. You know what, my mind is focusing on Mario right now because you just said it, and I hadn't thought of this before, but Mario is very focused on one level at a time, and like the way it goes and the way it makes the player run through the stage is very good. And I think that's a solid example of a game that does linear well. And then they kind of changed that a bit with Odyssey, but more so they changed it with that Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, I was 100% going to talk about Bowser's Fury, how I think that is the literal most amazing Mario experience for so many different reasons.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like I think the reason why it's super cool is, first and foremost, it's just different, which is nice. But to this conversation, linear versus open world, like it really forgoes everything that made Mario traditionally Mario games like what they were, and it instead just takes, what does Mario do? He jumps and like collects stuff, and like they put that into the open world game. So it's no longer really a Mario game. It is, but it's changing. I
disagree completely. I think it maintains what a Mario game is. Like even with the older ones, you're still very much point A to point B, but point A to point B might be not completing a level. It's just how to get to that next or the cat shines.
Yeah, the cat thing. Yeah.
I remember everything's cats in that game, and that's why it's the best.
That's
Mario
why you like it.
You could possibly play. Well, but it's just so like cool that it is Mario, and it is boiled. They're not trying to add a gimmick to it. They're taking all of the best pieces of what makes Mario, and they're just kind of like, cool, Mario does not have linear progression now. He can literally go anywhere. And then like that's the really only the change.
I mean, I don't know. Like I see what you're saying, and like I value that. And I just think that if I'm looking at what makes Mario, it's some objective that you're doing, like getting
So what you're saying, what makes Mario is that Mario's linear.
Mario is, I feel like he is typically very linear. Like, not RPG Mario, just like the Mario adventure games.
Yeah.
It's pretty linear. And I think that even with Bowser's Fury, there's fire flowers, there's power-ups, and you run around like you did in previous Mario games. It's totally the same in that respect. But I think if you were to look at, let's just throw it back to Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES, like it's a very different experience, not just graphically and like how the game runs, but you're going from world to world, like zone to zone in that original game, SMB3. And then with Bowser's Fury, you're going still from zone to zone, but like you see where you can go. You can impact how you go to the next zone by going a different route, or you can carry something else with you to like change your playthrough, if you will. So I think it at its core, it's still a Mario game, but it's very different with its execution.
Well, but I mean, if you think of the power-ups in Mario, I mean, if you don't want to go somewhere, if it's Mario 3, you can level skip by whatever the one item on the world map is,
Yeah, the cloud. Yeah.
or you can just completely fly over most levels, or some levels have the warp pipes or earlier exits. I think like at this, it is really just the same thing. It's just you're the only thing that's different is that linear frame or that open world frame. And like, as we're talking about like how would a game like the influence from the linear is completely on the open world, but you can't compare a linear game and an open world game because the framing is what makes it completely different. So like that's what I'm saying. Like I think it really is the same game, and what is just different about it is just the fact that it's open. And that's kind of what you said, where if you're like, well, but I'll just get this power up, or I can see the other stuff, that is in essence what makes it an open world game. So that's why I think like, and like, I think at the end of the day, what we were just basically asking, is it done well? And yes, because we're talking this much about it. Like Mario is, because it is one of the longest series, and it's probably the most successful series. I don't think many people would argue with Mario being the probably the most successful series ever made, right? Like I think
I would agree with that.
That's fair. They're masters at what they do, and they've shown that Mario is successful in so many different like vehicles of play. So it doesn't really surprise me that he works both in open world and linear. I just want to see more of that. Like that was a very nice snippet. I would love to see like a fully open world Mario, and Odyssey kind of started to hint toward that, but it still was very like zonal versus
zone based.
Open world.
Yeah, I agree. To move on from Mario, I do think that another Bowser's Fury fully fleshed out would be amazing. And to talk about
more Cat World, please,
or just cat themed spin-off game. Another series that I think has done linear gameplay maybe a little bit better than its open world gameplay, and it's still an asterisk because I feel like it's a little bit of both. I still really like the original Fallouts, probably a little bit more than the newer ones. And I don't know if I would directly say Fallout 1 and 2 are open world games, because they're really not. They're pretty linear, but I think that they captured what I think Fallout is like better than the Bethesda open world style did. I think that Bethesda's games are still really good for what they are, and they take, like we talked about Mario and the aspect of what made Mario Mario. Bethesda took the aspects of what made Fallout, and they ran with those, but I think they missed a lot of the more unique, like desolate wasteland storytelling that you could get from the original ones, and I think that that's still missing from the series, and that was only exacerbated in Fallout 76. And
that was completely omitted. I think that the original Fallout games are open worlds, because if you think about it, there are different ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and you can skip things, and you don't have to go in the intended quest order in order to do things. I mean, you can beat the final boss by talking to him, you know. I think it is. I'll disagree a little bit and say that just maybe Fallout has gotten worse, with the exception of New Vegas. I think aside from a playstyle change, New Vegas is truly like taking it back to those older games, because it isn't it at the end of the day like a company that made isometric RPGs. Yeah,
that's what
it's Obsidian, right?
Obsidian, and then Interplay before that. Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people will kind of like meet in the middle and say Fallout New Vegas is probably the best, because it is like the action game that 3 introduced, but it's still very much so that
it's
like,
Fallout-y.
Fallout-y progression in the sense. But at the end, we can both agree that Fallout just doesn't feel like Fallout anymore.
Yeah, it's very, very different. And I like where it is. It's cool, but like, I wouldn't mind the other ones.
Yeah, seriously. And speaking of which, and I think maybe this might be a good place to end our conversation on open and linear
Sure.
games, do you think that there are certain aspects that are done poorly or not as good as they could be? And why I wanted to switch over to this is because I immediately, whenever I think of like poor things in open world games, I think
Mm,
of those fluffy quests that I was talking about that are just so filler. And I think they're
filler.
called
Yeah.
radiant quests. Is that right?
Oh, I've never heard that actually. Maybe.
Yeah, I think I think that's what they're called. I'm not 100% certain where that
Hmm.
name came from, but sometimes they're faction quests where you just talk to a random faction leader. So that could be like the Thieves Guild person, and it'll be like, go steal this. Or
Yeah.
it could be the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 4, and they'll be like, go clear this or go find this piece of technology. And they're not built into the
The main
narrative.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like literally like, oh, you wanted something to kill time and get a little of bit of money. Cool. Here's a randomly generated thing that you could
Hmm.
do. And it really upsets me because it doesn't make the world feel like it's lived in anymore. And I think that's why, like we were saying, Fallouts 1 through 4 or Oblivion, when you do a quest, sorry, Fallout's 1 through 3 plus New Vegas and Oblivion, when you do a quest, you had that impactfulness of you did something here, like you changed something, and
Yeah.
now you have this like thing that you're doing, and it's like you just did that for money, bro. You just you just
Right.
prostituted your time to make a little coin. And it didn't change anything aside from maybe making someone like you more. It's just very upsetting to me. It's very lazy. If The Witcher can make like 90% of its investigation quests cool and unique and meaningful, then
Hmm.
I highly believe that any of the other developers can as well. But what about you?
Yeah.
What are some things that you think in linear might not have been so great, or in open world?
Yeah, for sure. I think resting on your laurels is a big one. And I think that there's times where you could, I'm saying you as the developer, they could do more to like expand the universe they're in or the gameplay, whatever. And I
So
think
do
it's
you
because
mean from game to game, like from
yeah,
one
yeah,
to two?
from like game to game. And I think the biggest one I'm gonna pick on, and it's because we were just recently talking about it, is probably Pokemon. And I think that it's I would say it's pretty linear, like you know where you're going. But I think there's so much opportunity, and like it's good to see Arceus do something a little bit different. But like I don't know, there's so much potential that could be happening there, but I feel like Nintendo and the Pokemon Company just stick with the tradition of going forward and this is what the game is like, which is not bad. Like that has worked for games like Mario, to an extent Zelda, but like when you think of what are gamers talking about now, like yeah, Legends Arceus is cool. We just talked about Bowser's Fury. We've talked about Breath of the Wild before, and we can even mention A Link Between Worlds, which take the idea of what started as the basic type of game for that and then do something different. But like Pokemon really hasn't. And I'm thinking out loud, like there could be a game that's more I wouldn't say slice of life, but something like that, where like you're the gym leader. Or there could be one where instead of being like a trainer, you're, you know, one of the other people. I know they have Pokemon Ranger and things like that. Like, what about more of those things?
Or
So,
even if it's really just the case of going amongst your way to complete the 8 gyms, what if I did it in the order that I wanted to do it?
yeah, exactly. And like, instead of following the tradition of going this, and this, why not give the player the choice and like try it? And it could be something that could be great, and it might be something that doesn't work, and maybe we just don't know we don't want it. But like, I kind of want to try it, and so
I
I
wouldn't be
want to see
mad at
those
Nintendo
things.
for trying something. And Adam and I just recorded the Arceus episode,
Oh,
and
nice.
what we were saying is, in throughout the gist of it, is we're not mad at Pokemon for trying new things. We were more mad about them for taking away things that worked. And I kind of feel that, like,
Hmm.
you know, if they tried to do an open structure in Pokemon where, you know, in what would normally be the 8th gym, you tackle first, and the gym leader sees, oh, you have 0 badges, so it has like a list of Pokemon and levels that it pulls from in
Yeah.
order to like say like, okay, well, this is your first gym, so this is who you face, but like keep in mind, if you go to who would normally be first as your last person, he's going to have 6 Pokemon and they're all going to be level 50. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah. Make it not about the level, but like about the elemental skill and prowess you have as a trainer. Because like, isn't that the point? And like, yeah, that could be really cool.
and think of what that would do for speed running or changing how you
Yeah.
play the game
Mhm.
too, or the Pokemon that you currently have, where maybe on my team it's like, well, I don't have anything that would be good against an electric gym, but I do have a lot of things that would be good against a rock gym. So
Mhm.
I go
Let me go
tackle the
there. Let
rock
me do
gym
that.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of like being like, well, I either need to super grind or I need to use a Pokemon or I just need to pray that I'm going to make it through this gym. So yeah, I think I agree with you. We're kind of like resting on that. Well, but it's Pokemon and we'll keep increasing the level of cuteness in the numbers. Let's go really hard on something unique because again, it's okay if it somewhat flops because you can grow
Mhm.
from that.
Yeah, and the games still print money, so like you're gonna make money regardless. But I understand why, from a business standpoint, you'd want to keep it the way it is because it clearly works. But like, I don't know, I don't really enjoy Pokemon games as much because it's always the same thing over and over. So seeing Arceus and other games like that is what I really want to see.
Man, it's kind of hilarious that every time we talk about things that we're really struggling with, it always lands back on Pokemon. But because we just did a full episode on that, instead of talking more, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. But while we're doing that, we would love to hear your thoughts on open world games and linear games on our Twitter, Instagram, or our Discord at HeyRPGaymer. We have a lovely little crew of human beings who talk on our Discord quite frequently
Yep.
and share their animal pictures. So we would love to have you join us. It's a great crew.
All right, before we get into our next section here, fun little ending game. Patrick, what you been playing?
Yeah. So I did Octopath Traveler maybe last episode or the episode before that. I think it was last episode,
Uh,
and still just really trying to clear out my backlog, which
what's a
I'm making.
backlog?
Yeah, for you, it's literally just it's and that stress that you feel on your back at any point. That's
Yeah,
your list
that's the
of your
backlog.
1,000 games. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
But for me, I got to finally open up Triangle Strategy, and
Nice.
I'm really happy that I did. I honestly think it's one of the best games I've ever played, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna say a real hot take. I think it's better than Final Fantasy Tactics.
Whoa,
Um,
let's not say things you can't take back. Calm down.
and in some ways, I think it might be what Fire Emblem wants to be. The
Oh,
newer
really?
ones, at the very least. The narrative is
Mhm.
very strong, which I think is really good and it's enjoyable. It's not over the top. Nothing has been so like crazy out there, fantastical, hyper anime
Yeah.
bullshit. It's like all in the realm of like. Oh, I was when I tell people about it, it's kind of like playing a non-boring Game of Thrones. Because it does have like that political influence and
Yeah.
intrigue and whatnot, but it's not so boring like Game of Thrones can be. Like I
Mhm,
enjoyed the
mhm.
novels and the show for the most part, but
But there's a
it,
lot of disposition. Yeah.
yeah, there is. And some things that I thought were really cool that make the game really unique. There's this whole system of you don't actually get to make the decision of how the game branches in its paths.
Mhm.
Your house does. So basically the game has a lot of branching points which gets you different characters and you see different maps and it impacts the overall progression of the game. Like at the very beginning of the game you can go see 2 different countries and I don't even know like what the other side looks like if I go and see this other country. But
Wow.
um instead of me just saying I want to go there, I talk to my house and they all have a certain side on what they're going to weigh. So 3 of them typically are going to say, well, we should go do this. And the other side will say we should go do this. And one
Mhm.
person, there's 7, is kind of in the middle. And it's your job based on the information and what you know about the characters to convince them of what you want. So one of your
Okay.
characters is a tactician. He's very logical. So if you want to convince him to vote for where you would like to go for the quest or the next part of the chapter, you have to think of like, what's the logical way I can convince this person? Or someone's very emotional. So yeah, you would try to convince them in the emotional way. And some of the choices are really heavy. Like the most recent one I had to make was, there's this group of people who apparently like sinned a long time ago. So in one country they are set to slave labor.
Oh wow.
But in your country they're not, and there's this village of them, and they're people who escaped that country where they were slaves, and the country that has them as slaves like, yo, if you want to work with us, we need you to give us those people back because they're slaves and they technically belong to us. And you literally have to convince the people in your house to be like, yeah, sorry, we're giving up these slaves, or no, we're not giving up these slaves.
We're
like,
gonna fight these people.
Yeah, I don't care if we like need to rely on them for help or anything like that. Like, this is just wrong and inhumane. So it's really, yeah, and a lot of the decisions are very much so like that, and it's hard to put down because that is just like very immersing. And then the combat is very good too. Like, it's just it's that next step of what Final Fantasy Tactics could have been. And I think a part of the difference too is there aren't any like filler characters. Most of the people are just like someone somewhat meaningful with personality, where, you know, in Tactics half of your cast were just like your rando units. So, yeah. It's one of those where like, if you're okay with having like maybe 30 minutes where you're more just like reading what's going on, I wouldn't say it's that long. Sometimes it feels like it's that long because they offer a lot of optional side content, but it's still very enjoyable. And you're like, oh my God, they're planning this bad thing behind the scenes. How am I going to get through this? Like, it's cool. Like, I think you would really enjoy it.
Wow, I didn't know all that about the game, and I feel like you've already sold it to me.
Cool. So it's so good. So good. But what are you playing?
Well, nothing like that. A few weeks back, I also streamed this random game based on an old anime I used to watch called Record of Lodoss War. I don't know if you know that one.
Yeah, there's this really funny Monty Python YouTube video comparison of Record of Lodoss War. At the very end, they had like the chibi style recap of what happened in the episode. And it's like Knights of the Round Table from Monty Python to that. It's so funny.
Nice. Well, a new game kind of came out. I think it was a previous system, but it got
right.
It had Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth. So I was able to pick up the physical copy on PS4. It was pretty cheap, to be honest, and it's pretty cool. We mentioned it earlier, but it is absolutely a Metroidvania game, very similar to Symphony of the Night in how it looks and plays. But the neat aspect of it, if you have that idea for what the gameplay is like, there's kind of this I guess I wouldn't call it light and dark. I think it's fire and wind. So you have like two elemental styles that Deedlit, who is your main character, she's like a high elf, that she can channel. And kind of like a game like Ikaruga or other shooters, if you're channeling fire, like, you don't take fire damage. So if someone shoots fire at you, you just absorb it.
That was smart.
And then same thing for wind or ice. I think it's wind. And then if you have enough of that channeled fire energy, you get to like level 3 fire. And then if you swap to the other one, you start to like gain life because your previous one is filled. So like you always kind of want to balance to make sure you have full level 3 for fire and wind, so you can keep gaining life. It's pretty cool. And then the game is a Metroidvania, so running room to room, grabbing objects, blah blah blah. It's not super duper challenging, and there hasn't been a lot of interesting like character progressions, like, now I could become a bat and reach this zone. Like, you still get like double jumps and things like that, but it tends to move a little bit, everything is a little bit faster. So like, it's very quickly going from boss battles to boss battles. And I'm not sure if I like that. Like, I think I might want it to be a little bit slower.
A little less on the exploration, a little bit more on just the combat.
Yeah, a little bit, because the combat's pretty cool. And you have a variety of weapons, blah, blah, blah. But the boss battles are pretty sick, and I like them so far. I'm just afraid the game's going to be over. It's only been like 3 hours, and I really want more. So we'll have to see. I feel like I'm right at the end of the game.
God forbid you finish a game, Jason.
I know. I need to stop it, so I don't ever get to that checking point. But I do also want to call out the game pretty much assumes you know the story of what's happening, because if you don't know what's going on, you're going to be like, seriously, what is happening? Because there's no explanation for what's going on or who these people are. And then the last thing I want to bring up, the game is very, very visually pretty. It's got a cool kind of retro art style, but it's still HD. There's a neat like sheen on everything. A lot of cool particle effects for like kind of like Octopath and Triangle Strategy. It's like the HD 8-bit or whatever they call it.
HD2D.
HD2D, yeah, it's pretty similar and it looks really cool. The gameplay's very fluid. If you're looking for a game that's another Metroidvania and you're just like, I want a quick fix, that's a really good choice for you.
Well, that's fun. Maybe I'll add that to my list if I ever get through the next 5 games I want to get through.
You should. And apparently it's quick. So it'll be a quick few hours and then you're done.
Before we head over to segment number 2, we also have more fan mail from our patron subscribers. So this one comes from Rye the Kitten Goat. I'm assuming I'm saying that, and I don't think Rye would be offended because we both actually know Rye. We have the question: romance in an RPG, a distraction from the storyline, or a great way to add variation to storytelling? I personally think that it is a great way to add variation. And we've talked about this quite a bit on the Discord about how much I would like the Iron Bull from Dragon Age to put it in my butt.
Oh my God.
Because it's a distraction, but it's a different kind of.
It's a distraction that you want.
Yeah, it is a distraction that I want.
That's right.
There are characters in, I think, a lot of games where they add a romance element where it can make the game very exciting. I don't always like it when you're tied to a particular person. And you have
like you're supposed to like this person, like Renoa or whatever.
Yeah, or like I think Colette is really cute in Tales of Symphonia, but like what if you could romance Sheena, or something like that? And there's nothing wrong with Colette, but just like maybe having that preference. Or it's kind of funny, they have the option to kind of marry someone at the end of Dragon Quest 11, and you can pick Sylvando. You don't really like see anything throughout the course of the game, but sometimes those little things can be cute because it lets you put a little more of yourself into a game as opposed to just being that character. But what about you? What's your thoughts on romance?
Yeah, I'm cool with it. I think it's nice to be there. 2 immediate thoughts. I feel like in a game like Mass Effect, where like you have an option to marry someone, I don't know. It seems superficial and not that good, and I'm only doing it to get the achievement or to get some boost, whatever. So I'm not really
a perk they give you for marrying them.
Exactly. So like I'm not really super into that unless it's like written really well. I just haven't played that game yet. That could be cool, but I think the better ones are probably where you're scripted as a character. So like if you're Zidane, you're like, I really do like Garnet or Dagger, like, and I like that story progression. So having buy into that to see that character evolve and like they do fall in love, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's a nice narrative direction, and I think it makes me feel the feels better of that character, and I'm all for it. So as long as it's well written and it's not just a throwaway, I'd say go for it. Okay, and we are back for our last segment here, and this is a rare one for all the listeners because I actually came up with this one, so we can see
it's so rare.
how this goes. Shut up. See how this goes. So on the topic of open world and linear games, I was thinking it might be kind of fun to see if we could craft a game or kind of give someone the objective here of moving a linear game into an open world style. So for example, each of us might pick a game series to give to the other person, and then that person will try to explain how it could be made open world, what would be the cool aspects of it, maybe even some random gameplay ideas, things like that. So for example, I might tell Patrick, traditionally the Final Fantasy series is pretty linear. So I might say, hey, Patrick, I'm going to task you with making Final Fantasy VIII into an open world game. Like, what would you do with that?
No.
Patrick will kind of, Patrick says no, then we move on to the next one. And then I think it would be kind of fun to go super crazy with it. So like you can pull from other games too. Like I want it to be Final Fantasy VIII, but it's Dark Souls. And like when the characters die, they die. Or It could be an open world Pokemon game, something like that. Like whatever we're thinking will be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Does that sound cool to you?
Yeah, let's go. Let's do.
All right, you want me to do the first one for you?
Yeah, you asked me what you got.
Okay.
This is going to determine how mean or nice I'm going to be to you.
Oh, lovely. Okay, well then, I got to see where I want to start here because I have ideas for all these too. But Patrick, I will give you the entire series. You can do with as you wish. But how would you make a Castlevania game into a fully open world Castlevania game?
Okay, so I would go to the Nintendo 64, get Castlevania 64,
and burn it.
Put a mortar in Castlevania 64 and blow it up. No, I think if I had to do something like an open world Castlevania game, it would probably look like Elden Ring in a way. I think that you know, you are a Belmont, or maybe you're like the last Belmont and you've been sleeping. You could kind of do it like Breath of the Wildy in a way.
You've been summoned.
And then there are like the 4 lords that you would have to fight in order to get to Dracula's castle. You know, I think I would keep it pure source in the sense of I wouldn't want to do anything like new and crazy because I think the new and crazy would just be the fact that it is Castlevania. As an open world. But definitely would have crafting elements in there. I think that one of the things, just kind of like getting the Master Sword, is getting the Vampire Killer Whip. But
that'd be cool.
There would still be a multitude of weapons that you could get in different armor pieces and whatnot. And I think also one thing that is missing in open world games is kind of like having companions. So I think that there would be a couple different companions that you could get that would kind of fit the Castlevania trope of like you have the mage or you have the thief oriented character, or maybe there's the good vampire, but you only can travel with them at night. I think just little things like that would make it really cool. And then you'd have all the thematic Castlevania monsters that fit perfectly in that kind of world.
Yeah. Would there be like, what would your RPG elements be? Would it be the traditional level up system, or would it be like based on gear?
I think it would be based on finding the upgrades. I think like I've made it kind of clear I don't like games where you can just grind through. I think it's more meaningful if you find something that increases your health meter. I think that's why Zelda usually does it well with like finding the pieces of heart to go up. So I think that is kind of what I would go. And then gear and that would make the difference on how you would handle those types of situations. And I think the sub weapons could add a nice little variety to the whole thing too.
That's true. That's supposed to be fun. Well, I would play the shit out of that game.
Yeah, same. Like
that would be really fun.
I want Castlevania to come back at some point.
Oh my God,
we need to see a resurgence of it. So yeah, that'd be good. But that was a good one.
It could be called Castlevania Resurgence. That could be what it is.
Yes, it really could. And look forward plugging season 3. Spoilers. We're going to be doing an episode on Castlevania. So see you there.
Site. Love it.
Okay, Jason, I have a fun one for you. You were pretty nice to me, but I want you to think outside the box. So
I'm thinking outside the box.
Jason, how would you do an open world game for Dance Dance Revolution?
Oh my God, I was thinking Mega Man for sure. Wow, DDR. Okay, so for the folks that aren't initiated, they attempted with DDR, nowhere near an open world game, but they tried to get you this like Globetrotter thing with like Supernova 2 or something like that on PS2. And you would go to like different zones in the world to like conquer them. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be something like that, where like you clearly will make your avatar, whatever you want it to be. You dance, you dress them up in funky clothes and stuff. And then I think you as the player would go to other like, you know what? Let's make it realistic. You would be like your avatar in a world where DDR is a game. And I think that you would go to like other arcades to like claim the arcade, like be the king of that dance. And then you can also like practice at like your local dance dojo, because in this world, everything is all about dancing. And there would be like, I don't know, paraphernalia and other things throughout the world that are all like DDR related. So there's like dance arrows, and people really like I don't know, DJ Alligator or whatever his name was. So he's like in the world too.
Maybe you could challenge people on the street too, where like you have a cardboard,
Yeah,
like
you
a
just
big
flip out your
dance
cardboard,
piece, and like
and
you just
they
dance
have
with,
the
like,
arrows on it.
yeah. So like that
That'd be
way it's
so
not
fun.
just arcades, but it like adds that variety.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And like trying to think of how to make it like RPGE, like why is my character like how can I assert my status? Like I'm thinking like maybe you can have when you get into the dance battle, if you will, it's going to be side by side obviously on screen, but like if you're higher level, like my dance arrows might like have different effects that look really cool. And like after each stage you get like your score rating, which can level up your like dancing credibility, and then so you're like more regarded, and then if you have higher regard, you can get like better deals at stores, better access. You can actually then have like new clothes. You can also have like DJs and whatnot be like, hey man, I want you to dance to my beat. And that's how you unlock like new songs, which you can like share with others. I think it'd be kind of fun. I feel like no one would play that, but like the idea would be pretty solid. And I think
if people would play something like an open world skateboard game, which I mean, like I feel like this is kind of, it's not Ollie World isn't quite open world, but
it's
like
getting there, though.
This has that vibe of that kind of game where, you know, you're starting to head in that direction where like the only difference is telling someone they could go anywhere on the map instead of just like a specific.
Yeah. The interesting thing about a DDR one though is like you're still going to be playing on the DDR controller, so I guess you'd have to have like the controller set up to like work it and actually dance through it. But there are unique interactions where like you could try to out calorie battle someone. You could like post like, you know, I lost this much weight, or here's my new high score. So like the interactiveness between like players could be pretty cool in an open world setting like that.
That was good.
That's funny. I was not expecting DDR. That's a good one. Okay. Well, I think I gave you my fun one with Castlevania, and I think that would be an amazing game, and you made it up well. So here's another one that I feel like you could probably see coming a little bit, but we're going to talk about Resident Evil in the open world setting.
Oh, I would fucking love this game.
I think this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, so I think Resident Evil in an open world would take place in a city. It could be Raccoon, it could be a different one. It would be the zombie outbreak that's going on, and you know, it's somewhat of that survival-esque, like maybe you have a base, a survival camp, or maybe you have like a group of survivors that's kind of with you, and you have to do some of these runs to get things for people. And the progression would be like to eventually make a safe path out of the city. But there's no like one right answer to get out of the city. You know what I mean? Like it's not like there's the route. There could be several different routes. And it's just kind of like you deciding, well, right now we don't have a lot of weapons, so maybe trying to locate a weapon store and deciding how many people you might bring with you. It would look a little bit like Outbreak, but I don't think it would be as like Outbreak is just very scenario specific. You know, I think Outbreak, for as weird as it was, it did have some successful things. I think bringing in what I think a multiplayer Resident Evil would look like and what people would want, because people don't want the hot garbage that they've been releasing for multiplayer Resident Evils, whether that's Resident Evil 6, or which Casey and I are streaming, which you can check out right now, or like the other ones, which were you're playing like the Umbrella Squad. Like people don't want those games. They want something that's like one of the old Resident Evils.
Yeah.
And you play it like Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3. It doesn't have to be in that style. It could be like the remakes, but it's as full. Still like
a limit on gunplay. You know, things are scarce. Things like that.
Yeah, people want something more like that than just like mowing down zombies. And it wouldn't have to be multiplayer. It could be single player, but yeah, I think just setting up in the city and maybe some of the cool elements might be a Skyrim-esque Skyrim or Oblivion-esque leveling system, where the more you do things, like the more you do medical related stuff, you level up your medical skill, or the more you run and move, the more you your athleticism can kind of go up. I think that's what I would kind of bring into that one to like help you kind of diversify your character and how they get better.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. I'm thinking like borrowing elements from, I think it's Dead Rising, like Capcom series. For that one could be pretty cool too, like the crafting, like you said. But yeah, I feel like it's such an easy one. Like zombie apocalypse take over the world, just drop a player in and make them like survive.
I'm
It's
playing a
so
game right
simple.
now, and it's one of my faves called Outward, and it's pretty challenging. Like your character can only take a couple of hits and whatnot, and it's one of those things where you definitely have to come in prepared to a lot of situations, and that's how I would see this Resident Evil game going, where it'd be kind of the same thing, where like maybe you could set up a trap. Because maybe it's not a zombie,
Yeah.
it's like there's a
Mhm.
licker, and it's only going to stay in the trap for so long. So then you'd have to hit a few times, and maybe there's something that you could take that would make you a little bit stronger to do more damage, or
Mhm.
I just think like it would be one of those smarter decision type of open world games as opposed to something like
Just like a hack and slash away.
yeah, like obliterating all the zombies. But I would play
Mhm.
the shit out of
Yes.
that game. That was a good
And we
one.
make it multiplayer so we can play together.
Okay, Jason, I have one more for you. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I would pick this one for you because it's pretty much one of your favorite series of all time. So, Jason, I would love to hear you
I'm
make
ready.
Mega Man
Yeah.
an open world game. I feel like it's already
So
written
good.
itself.
It has, and we picked so many Capcom games. Yeah, oh my god.
Yeah, Capcom, take the fucking memo.
I know, right? Where to start with this? So I think there's multiple avenues that you could go down with this one, but I think it would be wise. So let's just focus on Mega Man X. We'll look at that series. I think it lends itself better because I've clearly thought about this. But in that world, like the robots or the Reploids, or whatever, have like a lot of them have gone rogue. So like you're trying to already stop multiple evil groups of like humans and robots, and like there's a virus. There's so many plot points that lend themselves to like easy side stories and side quests that can further develop NPCs or even your own character and the plot device towards a common goal of, let's just say it's defeating Sigma. You can throw him back in there.
Sugma.
The Sigma.
Sugma bows.
and the way that you could do it is just like how you said for Resident Evil, just you're dropped into that world as a new Reploid that's going to be there to like destroy the evilness. And then you can upgrade your gun. Do you want to use a sword? Like, these boots add sliding effects? There's so many options you could pull from for the Mega Man series. And then the gameplay itself, like the shooting, it could be awkward in 3D, definitely. But I mean, like, I'm pretty sure you can make it work.
I don't think it would be that awkward if you consider a lot of games. I mean, even Remnant, not the gunplay wasn't 100% the most solid, but it was still good. Like
it was solid. And like Remnant's almost a little too slow for Mega Man, but like Borderlands does it totally fine. So like maybe it should be first person, but it could be third. But yeah, totally. And then you can still bring in melee. You'll have flying enemies, you'll have underwater enemies, like, and then you as the player will you could take it as like the Breaker series, the Gundam Breaker series, whereas you defeat enemies, you pick up parts which you can then use to create your own weapons. You can augment your own armor sets. Mega Man X lends itself to a little bit of a more mature audience. It's a little bit darker. So I just feel like it would just work like so simply. Like,
well, just like we were
easy.
talking about Pokemon too, if you have that traditionally, this would be the last person. I think Mega Man has always done it in a way where if you're good enough, you can go in any order to defeat them. So this could be the same thing where like, maybe if you do the 7th Robot Master first or whatever, like
exactly
the other ones get stronger because you've already defeated one, just
and like
up it a little bit.
Yeah, and you'll still bring in the elemental difference, if you will, like this person's power is stronger against this one, but you just make it like this guy's weak against fire weapons. And like, yeah, it seems like such a no-brainer. I just don't know why these games don't exist, Patrick. This is really frustrating.
This is like, I don't understand why we aren't making these games, because they're just so many different avenues, and I think people are tired of seeing things staying in the same lane, and that's why indie games are so great, because indie games actually try to do some of these things.
Small plug. I think when we do these things, we gotta start like, trademarking this and like selling it out, because we're giving too many free ideas to these developers.
It's almost like we need a way to chronicle these so that way they're always available in case we ever want to come back to them. But I can't put my finger on how to do that.
I can't think about that either. But like if there was like a website where you could just list all of our previous content and our previous podcasts, and then you could follow it and you could comment and like about it.
Yeah, like on
really
different
cool.
forms of social media. Like,
yeah,
if only we had those things. What would we call them?
I'm just thinking like I don't know, like I would be, to get your attention, I'd be like, hey, RPGaymer, and then you could like talk to us. So I'm thinking that's probably where it would be. And then if you really wanted to like discuss more so like straight up with Patrick and myself,
yeah, we had
like
a group
if there was
somewhere.
If there was only some group chat that like, I don't know, like just something like Discord I've heard about, like, and just talking on there about all these topics, that would be really fun.
And where could people support us though, for our great ideas and our entertainment in this really long ongoing joke? Like, if they just wanted to throw money at us and get cool swag and whatnot, like, is there even a thing for that?
I don't know, because I mean, like, if you were to like go to a store and be a patron there, and you would just give them money for their goods, like, I mean, in theory, you could be, I don't know what we call it, like a Patreon or something for RPGaymer, and support us that way and get some cool free content, like access to an exclusive channel in that Discord app we're talking about.
You're giving me a Patreoner right now.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then also you can ask your questions for us. So when you go back to that weird location where it archives all these podcasts, you can hear our answers, on the podcast.
We want to thank you, most importantly, for suffering through that long joke. But, of course, make sure you hit us up on Twitter and Instagram and Discord at HeyRPGaymer. We love you guys. We love your thoughts. We love your comments. We love our fans. You guys are great. And check out our Patreon, too. We're just about to throw out our first round of swag, so it'll be great. If you enjoyed listening to us today, be on the lookout for our next episode, the RPG Graveyard, where game series go to die.
Like, I'm so excited.
And Casey will be back for that episode, and it's coming up in 2 weeks. We appreciate you all for listening and hope you had a great time. Now, go out there and get gaming.